Hello.
And then we'll start with the webinar.
Sounds good.
So, hi, I'm Samantha, and I'm the moderator for today. So, I've been working with Let's Talk for a while now, and so a little bit about Project Let's Talk. So, basically, Project Let's Talk is an initiative taken by two young minds, Aryani and Kashish, who are there as a part of the meeting as well. And they wanted to break the stigma on mental health and create awareness around it. They wanted people to feel comfortable to approach people to take help. And that is how this little project started. And now we have completed it to a great level. We have conducted sessions over in different government and private schools and impacted over 3,000 students. Project Let's Talk is also being presented at the United Nations headquarters at New York City. And today we have Tanushree with us, who is from Fortis Mental Health. Tanushree, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So good evening, everyone. Like Samantha here said, my name is Tanushree, and I am an expressive arts-based therapist and a psychologist with the Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Sciences in Fortis. And I especially work with in inpatient care as well as which is in the hospital setup, as well as seeing outpatients, mainly children population as well as adult and young adult population. So that's my area of work, as well as I do a lot of group-based creative arts training as well, with majorly with groups and organizations. And yeah, so that's about myself. And and essentially we use a lot of art-based methods and techniques in our work, as well as both the the art lives that are being done these days, as well as in clinical and non-clinical work too. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Tanushree. I'm sure that we all are going to learn so much from you today.
Yeah.
Yes, Tanushree, would you like to take over now?
Absolutely. Okay, so today's topic is called positive psychology. The science behind it is, I believe, the topic for today. And since I myself am coming from a mental health background, would like to see how positive psychology, which we break it down, it would be a more embodiment of more positive, resilient attitude towards life and towards life stresses and situations, and how that has a correlated effect to our mental health. And currently within the given context as well, with the COVID situation, needs for isolation, reduced interaction. Even if there is interaction, there's always the thought behind the fear that is there in relation to our own health, the fear that is there in relation to not to being the sort of stress that's there also in being able to be more socially responsible as well while interacting. And given all of this aspect, how does positive psychology come to it, and why positive psychology is one of the ways that can be adopted as a means of staying resilient, especially in those times when stresses are there, when things are also quite uncertain as well. But before we sort of move ahead, of course it's important to address the kind of stresses that come along the way. So these are also the kind of stresses that we'd also like to look at it from the Venn diagram of biopsychosocial model, which means to say that both our biology, our physical, and our personality traits, as well as the psychological aspects and the societal and the outer situational effects, all of these aspects affect our mental health and our physical health and emotional health equally. And similarly, when we're working towards bettering our mental health, these are again the three areas of interventions that we also look at. Okay. And one of the things that we do try to focus on, when we look at from the perspective of positive psychology, one of the basic tenets of it is to say that how do we invest more on positive experiences as a means of leading to a more subjective sense of well-being and a higher quality of life. And here there are five things they focus on, which is what they call an acronym of PERMA, which is P is for positive emotions, E is for engagement, R is for relationships, fourth is the M is engaging in meaningful experiences, and lastly, which is the A, which is called achievement. that for us to, for us as human beings to sort of flourish, if we're following the the philosophy of positive psychology, is to, number one, by positive emotions they also mean to say that investing on emotions such as hope, making mindful efforts in order to experience hope. There are a lot of art exercises and activities on when you have your self-care and your me time, you take out time to make your draw your signs of hope, draw your spirals of hope. What are those things that give you hope in a times when you feel helpless, right? Your people in your life, hobbies that you have, the things that you value in your life, right? So looking at investing on positive emotions, despite the fact that yes, there are going to be days when it's tough, there are going to be days when you feel disappointed, you feel hurt, and going out a little bit away from the positive psychology spectrum, it's important to also sometimes, when you are in a more emotionally uh, strong point, it's important to also invest in understanding what is causing the pain. It's also important to understand what is sometimes making you feel lonely. Okay, because again, one of the reasons why we suffer psychologically and emotionally is also because we tend to ignore the problem, right? I think the idea of investing in positive emotions is great, till the fact that we don't also deny what needs to be what needs to be essentially given attention to, which takes us to the second part of karma, which is engagement. By engagement they mean to say that you this is where like our hobbies come in, things that we love to do. Even like we know sometimes we love talking to people, we love engaging in conversations, that's that's equivalent to somebody's hobby as well. We love to, sometimes I just like to rest and I love to sleep, that's also one thing. But sometimes I like to do art or draw a comic. That's one of my favorite hobbies. So even sometimes we notice that even when we're trying to engage in these activities, we realize that our thoughts sort of come in, so much so that instead of being present on what you're doing right now or whom you're talking to, or what you're discussing about or what you're drawing, you're more focused and sort of hooked on to what happened a few days back, what's worrying you about the future. So engagement says that, how about being mindfully sort of engaged with what you're doing? Because the more you are engaged in the current present of what you're doing, you tend to go into that the flow state where you feel highly satisfied with what you're doing, right? Then the third one is and again, engagement is also the opposite of feeling less disconnected as well. Okay, because sometimes you also notice that even when we are with other people, we feel this sense of loneliness. Why is that setting in? Are we being able to focus and be fully engaged with what we're doing? If not, then what's coming in between that, and what do we need to address it? The third part of karma is the relationships, which means investing in in relationships that are important to you. Not, as we grow sort of as we grow more into from a teenage to adolescence to young adulthood, we also notice that our social circle sort of gets more narrower, right? We become more picky, we become more our close knit groups become much more specific as well, and we know who are the people that we reach out to where. So investing in those relationships, so making a point at the current time, of course with the restrictions, but yes, more like online, online based platforms to stay connected. That is again another antidote to sort of being more connected as well. And the M aspect is the meaningfulness, which means to say that beyond the self, what are the other things in your life that's important to you? Right? What are there any social concerns that are important to you? Are there any things within the community that you want to invest your time on? So these are again, what are the other aspects which are important to you, which is outside your own self, right? Once you've started working and you're simultaneously working on building your strength, on building your skills, on working with your fears, on working with your worries, you can also simultaneously work on to doing bringing about a change. Let's, for example, this platform of Let's Talk is an example of that. Is that along with taking other personal responsibilities, the person who have started this has also taken in a step to contribute to the society through for the areas on mental health. right? That's a meaningful investment, a meaningful expenditure of time. Then lastly, we're looking at A, which is achievement, which is also quite important to us, because all of us as individuals, when we look at that Maslow hierarchy of needs as well, we always want to keep building towards achievement. We want to build towards mastery. We want to be good at what we do. We want to excel. Now, this is what comes in. So by excelling, we look at our own masteries, our own the skills that we can build, qualities that we can build. And the other pros to this is also, along with understanding your skills, you also get to learn your limitations as well, which is again a very important aspect to boundary setting and being assertiveness as well. Right? Sometimes we take on a lot of things because we want to put ourselves in a new space to challenge our own self as well, right? But that also can allow us to sort of identify the things that we are that we are exceptionally good at, and also the things that are beyond our ability to sometimes manage as well, right? So these are the five aspects within positive psychology, the realm of what we can look at for working and essentially the whole science behind this is, again, to say that one of the very important aspects that comes out this days from positive psychology is the practice of gratitude, right? Which can be a very important part of self-care practices. And I think this is one thing that I did want to highlight today, in terms of self-care, how gratitude building can be an aspect of self-care as well. And the reason for the reason why gratitude, the science behind it is that when you are grateful, when you express your thankfulness to something, whether maybe it's a writing exercise that you do, about writing journaling that you do on I am grateful for with the prompt, or you essentially do like an art based exercise on that, or you just maybe say it out, you're more thankful of a particular situation, and you're also more likely to be experiencing optimism as well after that. So and you're also likely to forgive. So when you forgive certain things, the negative emotions of resentment also reduces. A lot of time we're angry, a lot of time we feel resentful about a lot of situations, and at that time, practicing a little bit of gratitude, whether it is a part of your daily ritual or it's a part of whenever you need to calm down to reduce the resentment and the negative emotions, then you can practice that. And that's the science behind that, right? And besides the just the model of positive psychology, there's also like I had mentioned in the beginning, that what makes up our mental health is also the very thing that can also this different aspects which can be a way for us to work on our mental well-being as well, which is both looking at, let's look at it from the ABC model, right? And also look at it from the Venn diagram of the biopsychosocial model, which is that if our if you're not sleeping well enough, okay, our
Tanushree, I'm very
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you here. I think someone's mic is on. Can you all please turn your microphones off?
just 1 second. I think the background is
Guys, please wait a minute and I should be back.
that
Like,
was my dad trying to work on some stuff at home.
oh, I'm so
I think,
sorry. I thought
no,
that
it's fine.
someone else's mic was on and that is where the sound was.
No,
I'm
I
really sorry.
figured it was the background from my side as well. All right. Yes. Okay. So resuming back to the whole, ABC model of the very, I think it's quite a simple model, which says that how, it's a model based on in terms of how we, our perception of situations, our perspective of situations in terms of a lot of time, how the A being the activating agent, the the situations outside us that cause the stress, the B being our belief in terms of how we see it, and C being the consequences of the same thing. And a lot of time, in order to tackle the stresses or the problems, we either try to do like a behavioral intervention, which becomes like the C, right, which is the consequences of it. Sometimes we try to, fix our routine. Which is a very important and essential aspect of mental health. Maintaining our routine, maintaining our sleep wake pattern, taking breaks, waking up on the same time as, and also having that sleep wake schedule, spending time in the evening for our own self, closing down all the screen time as well. These are also very important aspects of a routine. And sometimes when this does not work, right, like where even listening to some music sometimes does not help you calm down or does not help you work with your emotions, then sometimes we need to go back a little bit to our B, which is the beliefs, right, in terms of how we assess a particular situation, how we look at the situation. And this is where our thoughts come in. And a lot of time, there are the different kind of thoughts that mainly when we get hooked onto it, right, when we get very fixated on the thoughts, or when we get hooked to those thoughts, they can lead us to experiencing more negative emotions, they can lead us to being more isolated, more withdrawn. And when you are in that loop for a longer period of time, it starts affecting our mental health and our emotional health, as well as our physical health as well. If sometimes we're prone to, when we feel too anxious and stressed out, sometimes we tend to be a lot, we tend to have more somatic symptoms of the gastro symptoms, or the panic like symptoms, or the heartbeat racing. All these symptoms are more. So what we look at here is, the different kind of thoughts that you can identify for your own self. And I think having this one time, right, sometimes just having it once, because as a result of a very stressful situation that has happened, it's completely normal to have that, right? It's normal for our mind to last time I was talking to this person, and they mentioned about it was an individual who has gone through a particular loss, and this is the first time they've experienced a loss, losing somebody so near to them. And one of the major thoughts that were coming in was, what if the same thing that happened to the person also happened to me, right? And also just normalizing the very fact that such kind of thoughts, given the situation, given your exposure to the current situations, are very normal, was something that could that reduce the stress as well as the anxiety, right? The whole process of normalizing the thought. So as a result of one stressful situation, our mind can have these negative thoughts. Our ability to see things more positively and be more hopeful gets affected. But the concern comes in when it becomes a pattern, as in when to even small stressors, right? We start assessing it as more negative. We get fixated in the pattern. It comes in more often in the daytime, at the nighttime also, right? That we spend more time in that. So these thoughts are more negative thoughts, and these thoughts are, if not negative, it can be thoughts about self judgments. Okay, judgments about the self, like for example, it can be about judgments that you make about your own self competency, how you look. It can be about how my own performances, how I see myself, right? I'm a good person, I'm horrible, I can't believe I did that. So all of these self judgments that you have, it could be, judgments about the situations, how you see a particular situation. It can be worry, a lot of time, procrastinating and also ignoring the problem, some wishful thinking. These are all examples of the kind of thoughts that you need to sort of watch out for if they are happening for a more longer period of time. And if you've been experiencing more lesser, more hopelessness, feeling more helplessness, right? So these are certain things to sort of watch out for. And at a level when you know it's sort of manageable from your own end, we can practice and engage in more self-care practices. And in self-care, so I wanted to highlight self-care within two contexts. One is self-care in the context of what kind of self-care should we engage in? Because I know that there's so much literature out there on self-care, on what can we do about our own self-care, and there are multiple definitions about self-care out there, that we also sort of get confused, and we realize that, okay, I tried doing this but it didn't work for me. Why didn't it work? I did self-care but it didn't work, right? So this is where, given the current situation right now, also the fact that if you're working from home, suddenly working from home has become more work as well, while working from home for for some of us, and for maybe some of us it's more time that we have. So what do we do about the time? So addressing the first context, which is if you are working in a more stressed workplace, where you always need to be on your toes, that you always have to be maybe near your phone, near your laptop all the time, you need to be sitting all the time, even if it's past 6 p.m., you still have other screen time sort of work to do, or social media kind of work to do. If there are, if essentially if you're in a workplace, or in a kind of a work where you are needed to be more on your toes, you need to be on the calls all the time, it is sort of recommended to practice self-care, which involves in taking intermittent breaks during the day, right? And the reason for that is because this is what healthcare people do, right? When they are working in a highly stressed environment in the healthcare sector, they are sort of urged to take intermittent breaks, right? So the intermittent breaks, the reason being is that when you take more frequent breaks of a shorter period, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and multiple times during the day, what it does is that it leads to less chances of a burnout and chronic stress, right? And and when we start ignoring our own self, our physical health and our emotional and mental health, by overworking ourselves, what happens is that when a burnout happens, or fatigue happens, or a chronic fatigue happens, it's difficult to recover from them. It's a lot of time it can mimic symptoms of being depressed, that there's a constant sense of lethargy, no amount of sleep can help you feel rested. You are more prone to making mistakes at work, you're more prone to not wanting to go to work. So it sort of has a lot of cost in that. So if you know that you're working in a place which is highly stressful, take more intermittent breaks, right? And what you do in that break can be something which, as a coping mechanism, can be healthy, right? I understand that these days we have this whole thing about smoking helps you sort of relieve and reduce the stress, but who are we lying to? I mean, we all understand the consequences of that in terms of how what kind of health impact it does have on us, right? So more maybe even like a short 5-minute walk is helpful in releasing dopamine, endorphins, right? Those bodily hormones that make you feel better as well. So the more stressful the work environment, more the intermittent breaks, and these are the kind of self-care routine that you can engage in, right? And on the other aspect, when you are working at a time where after 5 p.m. you can close the work responsibilities, and you can get back to doing all the other things, you can maybe take out time in a week's time, whichever works for you, or in every 15 days, to sort of spend in a me time. This is where you engage in your hobbies, and your hobbies can also turn into skill building exercises as well, where you once you start getting good at something, your confidence also builds, your mastery also builds, right? And when you are good at something, when you know that your skills are building, your qualities are building, you also tend to see yourself as more competent as well, and that has a very good impact on how we see our own self. Okay. And the second kind of self-care is within the context of when you have more time with you, right? When you don't feel like you are, even whichever workplace that we are in, or even in college for that matter, even in, I know that this times, like, submissions are a lot there, ppts, projects, assignments, all of them are there, that always keep you on toes. So like the first kind of self-care breaks can be very, very helpful as well. And coming down to the second kind is where you take like designated weekly time for yourself, like a one time in a week of sort of for your own self, where you detox, where you stay away from screen time or anything that sort of stresses you out. Of course, like, I think planning is a very important part to it. Otherwise, we sort of tend to believe that every time I plan something for myself, this happens. Now that's a cognitive distortions, and a lot of time, and if you notice that this happens a lot of time, I think it's important for us to question why it's happening. Is there some things that I can alter in the way I'm planning that's leading to this, right? Is there another day that I can shift around to, right? Which is also a part of the consequences aspect of taking care of our mental health as well. And yeah, and with self-care, like these days, there are a lot of emphasis on the use of art as well. When we're looking at positive psychology and we look at the blending of art has a huge positive impact, especially in terms of, let's look at colors, right? We have a lot of association to colors, and some colors do have a calming effect, like your green and your blue colors, right? How about some days you just take out time to sort of paint and explore those colors, and they can be quite mindful and they can be quite cooling as well, especially when you feel stressed out and when you feel anxious. And but if you're feeling angry, then I think talking would be one of the best way to sort of get out that catharsis, or engaging in more physical activity would allow for working around those emotions. If it's again the feeling of loneliness that comes in, what you can do is, a lot of time we do sometimes tend to, if you do feel lonely, I'm sure there are like a lot of things inside which is also affecting you, and it's important to talk about it. And I am sure there'll be some a professional that you can find that will be able to understand you at your level, and help you, work through those thoughts, help you work through those feelings as well. And of course, most importantly, to not lose hope despite any sort of difficulties, because I think those are what builds resilience. There are there's this thing called optimism bias, where we sort of have this bias that the chances of any sort of misfortune happening to us is much more lower as compared to our friends and our peers, right? I think sometimes we do hold that biases, sometimes we do hold that judgments, but the idea is that, like we know about the statistics on mental health, that it's one in every four, and that's how frequent it is. And whether you've gone through those difficult challenges or not, it's important to know who are the people that you can reach out to, what are the things that work for you, what helps you change and alter your mood. Is it music, is it art, is it talking, is it engaging in other hobbies, and what kind of relationships matter to you, and also at the end, beyond that, what is important to you, right? So I think understanding all of these aspects do help in adopting a more optimistic attitude towards our life. And yeah, hopefully I've covered all of what I intended to talk about today. And in case if there are any questions from the audience side, I'd love to take them as well.
Thank you so much, Tanushree.
Mm.
I actually wanted to ask you something. So,
Yes.
when we talk about positive psychology and being optimistic, so the
Mhm.
first thing which usually comes to our mind is that we always have to be positive about life. We
Mhm.
always have to focus on good emotions.
Mhm.
And but we also say this that we grow when we go through pain, right? So, what do you
Yes.
think about it? What is your take on this? Should we
See,
ignore the negative emotions and go ahead thinking positive about everything, or should we actually try to regulate it? What do you feel about it?
So see, regulating is a very important aspect, right? And accepting, for that matter, which comes under not ignoring the problem that we're going through, emotional, mental, relational problems as well, right? And the thing when positive psychology says, focusing on positive emotions, it also means to say that what can we do to alter if we are going through difficult, painful emotions, right? of feeling extremely painful, we feel extremely lonely. There's a feeling of resentment, that there's worry, there is tension, there is jealousy, all these feelings, right? The guilt, shame, these are all difficult emotions that we experience. And also these are the emotions which are very difficult to regulate as well. Extreme sadness, right? Number one, it's necessary to, even with emotions, number one, it's necessary that we first accept it. And what is making us feel that way, if we know the reason, right? Sometimes if it's just one a particular situation, we know what the problem is then, right? And how it needs to be solved. But if it's something that's persistent and has been happening for a very long time without any particular reason, I think that will be one level higher in terms of the intensity of the emotion that you're feeling, because the frequency is a lot more. You've been feeling a lot more for it, a lot more of that emotion. So yes, number one, it's important to accept, right? When positive psychology says focus on emotions, it's basing that the focusing on positive emotions and trying to enrich your life by experiencing them has positive consequences to living a more flourished life. But not to say that you don't accept and realize that there are troubles also that needs to be addressed, right? That we need to work on that. So yeah.
Right. I understand what you're trying to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
If anyone else has any question, you can unmute yourself and go ahead with it.
So, okay, Sharvi has asked, is positive psychology basically a type of therapy, or is it an altogether different field? No, so positive psychology is one of the school of, it's a field within psychology, right? Which has emerged from the whole humanistic, school of thought, like your Abraham Maslow, your Carl Rogers, your Rollo May, all this the theories, the proponents, these people have propagated to the idea of humanistic psychology. And positive psychology is a field within that, right? Within psychology itself. So it's not a form of therapy, right? It is not a, but it is rather a sort of, if you look at it, it can be a way of adopting, and it has its own theory as well, but it's not a particular therapy per se. Yeah. Welcome.
If you're not comfortable in asking the questions, so you can also message either me or Tanushree on personal chat, and we'll be happy to take your questions.
I'll just look at. You talked about breaking. Okay, ma'am, you talked about breaking about a fixated pattern of thoughts. Can you elaborate? Yes. So, number one, to understand that you're having a fixated pattern of thoughts is the first. If see if something has been bothering you for quite a long time, right? It either comes out as a result of what we're thinking of that particular situation, right? Or how our thoughts has been, like what our content of thoughts has been, what the quality of thoughts has been. That impacts our emotions, right? And that also impact what we do and how we go about and how active we are throughout our day, right? Or in terms of how active we are can sort of influence our thoughts that we have to how we feel. Sort of all of these are like interconnected. So number one, to understand that there are some, if some aspect has been bothering you, first you need to take on like the, if you don't have a clear picture of what it is, first you take on like the role of an in of somebody who's like of your own self. You're investigating your own self, right? So you need to spend time introspecting that. So there is a method in cognitive behavior therapy which is called thought records. So we have another a thing called journaling, but journaling is again less structured, so it's more writing down thoughts, writing down feelings as well. But a more structured form to understand if your thoughts have been the reason for worry, or what kind of identifying the same patterns of thoughts that is coming again and again and it's worrying you, is number one, maybe you can start by keeping a thought record book, right? Like a small diary with yourself. Look at the first, in one column, write out the situations that had bothered you throughout the day, and in that, next to that situation, write down what was your thought. We call it like the automatic thought. What was the thought that popped up? Sometimes it can be, like for instance, whenever I get a new task, it's like, oh, that's a new task again. Okay, that's a lot more things. That's a lot more stress. So that's again the automatic thoughts that come about, right? So what are your automatic thoughts in that given situation that stressed you out? Then also write down the emotions next to it, how you felt as a result of it, right? So just maintaining these three columns for maybe, let's say, for 2 weeks would be good enough to sort of help you understand those patterns of thought, right? First, the first step to breaking any thought chain of thought patterns is to, number one, identify it and see what is the what's causing the problem in that thought, right? And then third, you look at rectifying it and changing it around. What can you do if it's something which is manageable by your own self? By defocusing, whenever you notice that you're hooking to a particular thought, you can maybe unhook it by sort of doing other things, distracting yourself, right? Or maybe just writing and journaling it down as well. That sort of helps you work with that thought as well. If not, then maybe you can reach out to like a professional that helps you sort of understand that further better, right? That's what. Okay. Could you shed some light on toxic positivity and its impact? So, toxic positivity, as the terminology, is something which is quite new for me as well. But I do, and I think if I've gotten it right, you are talking about on the lines of false hope and sort of, way too over sense of optimism as well, which where we sort of focus our belief that everything is so positive that nothing bad can happen, which is also on the same realms of optimism bias, right? Where all of us, which is also one of the reasons why we'll notice that if something uh, sort of like a misfortune happens to us, or something stressful happens to us which was unexpected, that also helps us understand that we also have this optimism bias where we always believe that this thing couldn't happen, but it did happen, right? So that's also an example of, I'm sure this can be an example of toxic positivity, right? And the impact is that the more unexpected any situation, anything is, right, the more difficult it is to also accept it. And it is more and when you don't accept a particular problem, right, it it sort of comes in as a barrier of working towards solving it as well, right? Because I'm sure a lot of times some problems are such that you need to face it head on, and there are some problems where you can take your time to at least work on first on your own emotions around it, and then tackle what the problem is, right? So this can be some impact, and of course it affects our decision making. We can sometimes end up making more, we tend to take more risk as well without thinking further about the consequences. So whenever you feel that nothing bad can happen to me, or I know everything is always going to be good, maybe we're not planning right, or we're not making good decisions, not accurate decisions for that matter, or making good judgments. So that is what the consequences of it can be. Yeah. How to be resilient during this pandemic? I think one of the things that are quite there across in the times of pandemic is that, number one, I mean, we've been in this state for quite a long time now, right? And by now, like, we have had so much time also. This would be a good time. How to build resilience about this is also, take out some time uh, to look at how this has also sort of impacted you in the past few months. What have you gotten to learn? What new opportunities have you been able to, sort of embark upon? What new skills that you've learned, right? Sort of like like a timeline ever since the pandemic has started to up till now. Take out some time, to sort of map out the timeline of your ups and your downs as well. I think that will sort of help you understand and build resilience, because you're going to be looking at both your achievements, despite maybe the feeling of isolation can be there, the feeling of disconnected can be there, but I'm sure there are other positive things that has happened also, and that can build resilience, right? And I think like for a lot of us, this pandemic has been quite a shift in perspective in things that are important to us. Like it has been like a point of reflection for us to understand what's important, what is not, uh, sort of also question our own choices, our decisions as well. Yeah. Okay, there are a lot more questions coming up as well. mm, okay. All right. Hey, actually, I was looking for more ways to practice mindfulness and gratitude in my daily life. Like you said, it's really great, but how do I incorporate it more in my life? So, number one is there are some things called, gratitude. If you like to journal and, engage in some artwork, like, for example, keeping a gratitude journal is also one of those ways by which you can do that, right? Expressing it more often. There are individuals I know who mindfully practice expressing gratitude every morning, because it helps them look at life from a more positive point of view. But if you want to look further into it, there is this form of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. It might it has pretty good sort of like self-help, uh, I not like the very common ones that we see out there these days, but really the ones who also work on mindfulness aspect as well, because it does. ACT has one chunk which focuses mainly on mindfulness as well, and how you can tackle those thoughts. So ACT for your own self, like acceptance and commitment therapy, is something that maybe you can look at. It has a couple of books for also your own personal reading too. Okay, eustress is sometimes considered as the stress which prevents us from being listless, and it motivates us to keep doing something. But slowly it turns into obsessiveness. What could be the escape for this? Okay, so when anything becomes an obsession, which means it's got more to do with your thoughts, right? In terms of again, when I look at when I'm seeing this from the ACT perspective, which is acceptance and commitment perspective, it talks about something called the concept of fusing and diffusing, right? One, the reason for any human suffering, they say, is that when we fuse to any thoughts, when we fuse to any ideas, when we fuse to any activities, action for too long, right? So when we exceed anything for a very long time, it becomes harmful over time. So anything that was helpful for you, sometimes denying or ignoring a problem can be helpful, right? Once or twice if you do that, but if you keep doing it repeatedly, now that becomes unhealthy for you, right? So the idea is, we know that it's turning into an obsession when, number one, it's taking a lot of your time. That is what you think about, whether in your sleep time, whether in the morning when you wake up, even when you're doing trying to engage in other activities, that is the thought that comes into your mind, right? So in order to first stop yourself from it, number one, identify it when it's happening, and when it is, try to engage in those activities where you actually diffuse from them, right? Where you don't see where you don't allow yourself to keep engaging and going in that loop again and again, right? So whether it is like using a biofeedback mechanism to pinch yourself, to sort of remind yourself again and again, try those things if you notice that if it's going into obsessiveness, right? How can we inspect our behavior, like checking if we are doing things morally correct? Well, that's quite a if you're talking about morality here, the moral aspect of it, it's quite difficult to sort of narrow it down just to behavior alterations. I think you can maybe sort of your behavioral changes would be as a result of what your own moralistic views and values are. Maybe you can start out by identifying your own what are the values that are important to you, in terms of what drives you to what are the values in your life which are very important. It can be like your for some people it's very important to be creative, so that is what drives them, drives the decisions and your actions. If kindness, compassion is something that's important to you, or what's your moral, grounding, or where you stand, so those things can sort of direct your behavior. So it can be like the other way around. Yeah. What all methods from positive psychology can be used if we are having a panic attack? Okay, so see, since it is this problem specific question that you've asked me, which is panic attack, a lot of time with panic attack, the symptoms would be a lot of times it's bodily, right? Physiological, either heart, your heart beats fast, you are sweating, you feel like you're losing control, your throat can parch up, it'll dry up, there's a tension feeling in your head, there's a zing feeling in your body. So all of these physiological symptoms, your breathing also becomes difficult. So the first step to do when we're looking at having a panic attack, and usually a panic attack doesn't stay for a very long time, right? So if you've had it multiple times, and I know the worry comes in that we'll have it again and I lose control, know that how long it lasts for, right? So that's the period of distress that I know it's difficult to tolerate it, right? But knowing that even after tolerating it, I've been able to get out of it successfully and wasn't that affected, I think that's again one way that you are tackling it already. First thing again is regulate your physiological symptoms, like if it's breathing, if it's too much hand sweating, you're feeling uneasy, restless, try to regulate that, moderate that through breathing, to drinking water. If you're standing, make sure to sit down so that you have a sense of control, like your body has a sense of control, right? And a second thing, what really helps with sometimes with panic attack is also I think focusing on the present, right? In terms of there's this technique the of what are the five things that you can see in the room, this keep describing each of them so that you're more grounded in the present, and your regulation sort of starts coming in as well. So these are few techniques that you can try: grounding methods, regulating your bodily response through breathing, to drinking water, to resting, to sitting down, knowing how long it's going to last for. If any cognitive method sort of helps you, where it says, just calm, just breathe, this works for you like positive self-talk, then try using that. Yeah. Okay. I think I'll just take this last two questions then, which is what all methods from, the last question is what resilience exactly mean in perspective of psychology. See, resilience, there's a very good metaphor to sort of explain resilience, which is that, like a bouncing back. So even when the thing with resilience is that you bounce back even when situations are difficult, right? Even when the you've been going through a very tough time, but you've been able to sort of bounce back out of it, feeling more stronger, feeling like you've had more, that you've built, that you've grown, that you've developed, that you've learned new things about your own self and a new perspective to tackling life problems. So that is what resilience is. It's the same as bouncing back. Yeah, that's what. Yes, I think we're done with the questions.
That's wonderful. If anyone else has any question, I think we can take a last question here.
Yes, I can ask. If a
Yes.
person comes with an intense feeling and he is not able to help himself, and when he is coming to you, and what will the guidance will you give for him?
Okay, so number one, see if we're meeting the person for the first time. Now, it's first is essential to one of the basic foundations with counseling, and dealing with individuals who are coming to you for professional help, is to number one, build rapport, make the person feel safe, and also the basic counseling methods and techniques of validating and understanding the person, what the person is going through, helping validating and normalizing those emotions or the reasons why they are feeling that overwhelmed, right? So I think we'll essentially start with that makes the person feel safe, understood, so that and whatever the problem and the reason that's making them feel that way, and knowing that through a collaborative work and a supportive work, that like a solution can be figured out through a process of working through therapy or counseling. So that would be the first steps. So the basic foundations of counseling is always a good the basic steps when we're looking at building trusting therapeutic relationship, I think, which is essential here. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a really informative session, and I really hope that it was a great help to all of the participants as well.
Thank you all so much. Yeah.
A little announcement here I want to make. So we will be sending you out some feedback forms. So please make sure that you fill it. And if you after you fill it, you'll receive a certificate within a few days. And also, if you have any questions related to positive psychology or anything else, you can approach either Let's Talk or Tanushree ma'am as well. I hope
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Sure. And we also have an upcoming project coming up. So, and if you want to volunteer for that, we'll have a question in the feedback form, and you can say a yes, because we're really looking for volunteers right now, and we have some great opportunities for you coming up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. I mean, good evening or the rest of the day and the weekend. Bye bye, everyone. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Take care. Stay safe, guys.